Prime Minister Skerrit promises to put an end to opposition violence ahead of Friday's elections. The national strike continues in Colombia after ESMAD riot police repressed peaceful demonstrations throughout the night. And in France, unions hold nationwide strikes against the government's plans to overhaul the pension system. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. We begin in Dominica, where the Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit has said the irresponsible violence by some opposition supporters is now damaging the economy and the livelihoods of all Dominicans. He promised to use the full force of the law to end the vandalism and promised there would be free and fair elections on Friday.
I say to you today, law and order shall be maintained in the Commonwealth of Dominica. There shall be free, fair, and peaceful elections in this country on Friday. I have given both the airlines and the cruise sector our assurance of safety and security for the guests while visiting our island. I appeal once again to those misguided youths acting on the direction of persons who should know better to cease and desist from the flagrant violation of the law. Please, walk away from your lawless behavior. I have a duty to ensure that law-abiding citizens can go about their business free from fear and without intimidation or unnecessary inconvenience. As Prime Minister of this country, I met with the High Command of the police force to make clear that law and order must be maintained and that, as of tonight, perpetrators of lawlessness who endanger the rights and well-being of citizens and visitors must be dealt with, utilizing the full force of the law.
Speaking at the Rosal Central Block meeting an hour after his address to the nation, Skerrit also lamented how average people are being impacted by these demonstrations.
There's a gentleman from Colio, ladies and gentlemen, who has been at the blockade since morning, trying to go to the hospital to get dialyzed, ladies and gentlemen. We've been trying to get him a fishing boat to take him to Roseau so he can go to the hospital before he dies. That's what these bandits are doing to Dominicans, ladies and gentlemen. And every one of us must be angry with these guys. And we must demonstrate and show our anger towards these guys and our dissatisfaction in them by going into the polls and putting our X next to the shoe, ladies and gentlemen.
Now, the Prime Minister also lamented the economic impact of the opposition violence, pointing out to the importance of tourism to Dominica's economy. He noted that some flights and visits by cruise ships have already been canceled. Our correspondent, Alejandro Kirk, went to talk to Dominica's Tourism Minister, Robert Tong, to find out more.
Hello, greetings from, we're standing right in the Ministry of Tourism, the Minister's office, Mr. Robert Tong. The issue today is the problems that the violence sparked by the opposition in the country have created for the country's economy, very dependent on tourism. This is what we want to ask the minister. Minister Tong, what's the damage that so far that the country has suffered?
Well, clearly it's very unfortunate that the opposition has taken a stance to use violence to bring their point across. And it's very sad that it has a very negative impact on the economy of Dominica and also the reputation of our country. We've always been known to be a friendly country, and I'm sure as you walked across the city, you would see that Dominica is filled with friendly people. And their actions have caused some flights to be cancelled. As a result of that, we'd work very hard with Seaborne Airlines or Silver Airlines to come in the afternoon and leave the following day, so we housed the pilots, but clearly the pilots had to walk through all of the rubble and all of the violence that was happening in Marigot. And as a result, they have taken a decision not to come to Dominica until after elections. So clearly many persons who come to our beautiful island for whale watching, for diving, for snorkeling, for hiking, for our hot water baths, which make you feel younger, they're unable to do that right now. You have persons come to Dominica for business, persons come in to meet their friends and their families, and as a result that is impacted. And clearly many persons who may have planned to come to Dominica are going to think twice as a result of that. But I want to say to the people out there that Dominica is still a very friendly country, a friendly people. It's just one or two persons doing this very negative stuff. Even our cruise line business has been impacted. Yesterday there was a cruise line that was scheduled to come to Dominica, and they actually turned away. And our Prime Minister, we've actually advised our Prime Minister, in order to ensure that the reputation of Dominica remains 100% intact. We don't want persons to come to Dominica and have an adverse experience. We've suggested that they don't come until after elections in terms of the cruise, because sometimes if there's a small blockage, it's going to affect the experience of the person on the cruise line. So you had all the vendors who were out there yesterday in the early morning setting up their tents for them to sell their produce, to sell their arts and crafts, to take care of the families, the taxi drivers. All of them actually lost money because they had to spend to do this kind of thing. So it's really having a very negative impact, and all of the work that we've done, especially after Hurricane Maria, is actually putting us in a negative position. So we're really not happy about that, but Dominica remains a free and fair country. Persons have the right to speak, persons have the right to walk around and protest if they have to, but we ask them to do it in a very peaceful manner to achieve their results.
So how dependent is the country's economy on tourism?
Our country is primarily dependent on agriculture, but what we have done is to twin the two together. So when persons come to Dominica, we ensure that they experience a Dominican experience in terms of the food, the drink that we have to offer. So these actions impact not only the tourism sector, but it's also impacting the agricultural sector, because all of these agricultural persons, the fish, the vegetables, the fruits, they provide those to the hotels, and in turn the visitors partake in these and enjoy them. So all of them are impacted as a result of that. So just imagine the farmer who wanted to bring his produce down to town was not able to do that. He would have to bring it back, and I'm just hoping that it didn't spoil and he was able to sell it somewhere else. So everyone is impacted, both those directly in the tourism business and also indirectly out of the tourism business. They're all impacted in a negative way.
Well, if 4,000 people are arriving in this small town, it has an impact. But do you have any figures of what is the income-wise, what tourism represents?
Tourism, it should be in the region about $350 million in terms of the economic impact into the country. And what we did with that, we used the Citizen by Investment program to build 5-star hotels to attract a higher level client who will spend more money. And we have the first hotel which is open, which is a Kempinski Hotel in Portsmouth, a very beautiful hotel. And actually they're filled. They're fully booked for December, they're fully booked for January, and what the worry, they have over 150 people employed. The worry is that if people begin to cancel, you can well imagine the impact on them and throughout the entire economy. So we're really concerned about that, and we definitely do not condone acts of violence in terms of trying to bring a point across. And it's just very sad also that the leader of the opposition has actually endorsed those type of actions.
Trust is built over a long time, but mistrust takes a minute. How do you see the prospects in the short, medium term?
I think Dominica has a lot of friends, and the intention is to make sure we reach out to our partners as quickly as possible and on a regular basis. So even from the Ministry of Tourism standpoint, we reach out to our stakeholders, taxi drivers, tour operators, cruise executives, the airline. We reach out to them, we reach out to them on a daily basis so they know what's going on, so at least it brings confidence back into Dominica.
Okay, thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much.
This is what we have so far in this today in Dominica, and over to you, Quito.
We thank Alejandro for that report. On Wednesday, opposition supporters blocked roads outside the capital in Dominica, and Labour Party supporters tried to clear them. Our correspondent, Alejandro Kirk, was there.
This is exactly what the opposition had promised in case they did not achieve their goals legally, an internal blockade. And that's how the town of Layou, north of the capital Roseau, looked like at sunrise on Wednesday.
Well, all of this is part of the process, because if the election is against the people, then the people need to stand up and stop the election. So what we're saying is we have a country with about 65,000 people and almost 75,000 voters. This can happen nowhere in the world.
Images like this can be seen in several spots in this island of 80,000, whose elections are due on Friday 5th. Yet, Labour Party members are determined to keep roads clean and safe.
It's a desperate situation with what some people are doing here. They wake up early in the morning to see if they can block the streets so that people from outside think that we are having a lot of trouble here in Dominica.
But not everybody is so welcoming.
Go back to all your fucking country and balance all the country. We done good here.
Dominica allowed observers from the Organization of American States.
Having listened to our officials who were there, that I think the OAS got a different picture from what was being portrayed before, and therefore I think their whole stance and whatever intentions they had in terms of interventions or interfering in the process, I think they have taken a different position right now, and in fact they're here up to observe the elections, and I'm sure they will see exactly what the government has been speaking about, and they will determine what is fact from what is not fact.
Dominica's situation makes you recall events in Bolivia prior to the November coup.
I'm not sure whether the OAS had intended to do something similar in Dominica, but our situation in Dominica certainly doesn't warrant that kind of intervention. Our history and political history will teach us that we have had free and fair elections all the years henceforth, elections in Dominica.
Jesús Romero and Alejandro Kirk, Telesur, Dominica.
Peter Wickham of Cadres in Barbados has been involved in pre-election polling in Dominica. We asked them how voter intentions have evolved and if they have changed as a result of the recent opposition violence.
Yeah, I mean, the last part of the question is very difficult to answer. Certainly our polling would have ended about a month ago, and these violent protests started more recently. The sense that we got when we did our polling was that the governing Labour Party was doing reasonably well. There were, of course, a sense of, I guess you could say, about a lethargy that we were seeing. But my sense was that they would still have been able to prevail in the final analysis. When I see these protests and I see this reaction, it tells me as a pollster that the opposition is not convinced that they're doing well, and they believe that they need to step up to this level in order to take action. You know, we have a very simple formula in the Caribbean. If you want to change your government, you get people to go out and vote for it. The fact that they are saying on the one hand that they believe that there will be a change, but on the other hand, they're pushing this violent protest says to me that they're not convinced that there will be a change, which is consistent with my polls, which are saying to me that it's not consistent that there will be a change. As to the impact that this will have, it worries me. There's clearly an economic impact. I think that it destabilizes the country, and I don't know that it helps either side, quite frankly, as we move towards an election. The question then will be, how will people interpret these actions? Will people interpret these as being something which is widespread? My sense is that it is not. It is pockets of opposition supporters. Whether people will think that this is the type of opposition that they would want to put in government.
Coming up after the break, the national strike continues in Colombia as protesters take to the streets of several cities in the country. Stay with us. Welcome back. The national strike continues in Colombia. Now protesters are taking to the streets of several cities against the government. Members of the SMAT riot police repressed peaceful demonstrations throughout the night. Several people are reported hurt and arrested by police. In Soacha, Valle del Cauca, Bucaramanga, and Antioquia, police fired tear gas at several children and adults that were there. Several arrested. This despite local authorities promising not to request police intervention. In Pereira, police fired tear gas and rubber bullets against protesters on Wednesday night. A large crowd chanted "murderers." Human rights organizations say at least 11 people were arrested in Pereira and are now demanding action from the Ombudsman office. Our correspondent in Bogotá, Hernan Tobar, has the latest on the strike.
Workers' unions say more than 2 million people have joined protests across the country. to demand an end to the government's neoliberal policies, which usually affects middle and lower class citizens the most. Protesters demonstrated peacefully at Bolivar Square in Bogotá, but we are told there was violent repression and scuffles between strikers and riot police in Cali, Bucaramanga, and Cúcuta. The members of the strike committee will meet with government representatives in hopes of beginning dialogue and having their demands presented to President Iván Duque. For now, they are denouncing the government for stalling the talks that are needed to address the issues affecting workers, students, campesinos, and healthcare professionals.
We thank Hernando Ar for that report. Chilean lawmakers are rejecting a so-called anti-looting bill that was passed in the Senate early on Thursday. With 33 votes in favor, the legislation proposes sanctions for those who use protests to promote public disorder. Those who voted against say the law does not use the words anti-looting and could be used to persecute demonstrators.
We were invited to vote on a project against looting. And I want to be very precise. I am against looting, fires, and the destruction of public and private property. But this bill that we have just read, because it has just arrived, says nothing about looting. The only thing I see in this text is an attempt to criminalize legitimate social protests. The Attorney General, Jorge Abot, has said this morning that social and political conflict cannot be penalized. This is why I'm voting against it.
In Bolivia, opposition Senator Janine Áñez has fired her recently appointed cabinet chief, Jerjes Justiniano. The outgoing minister said he was dismissed because of his close relationship with Luis Camacho, the main leader of the coup, and Áñez's rival for president. According to Justiniano, the self-proclaimed leader should not vie for president after she selected the members of the electoral court who are responsible for deciding on elections. This recent development shows how the de facto administration is in crisis, united only to depose President Evo Morales.
Now she wants to be a candidate in the election, and that's why she decided to take control of the ministry. In the beginning, she didn't care for my proximity to Camacho, but that has changed, since he said he'll run for president.
Tens of thousands of residents in Bolivia's eastern department of Santa Cruz have faced a hike in their electricity bills by more than 500%. Members of the community led protests against the rate increase, which came after the coup against President Evo Morales. The price hike is expected to be extended throughout the country and will also affect gas and fuel. The Rural Electrification Cooperation has argued that the increase was as a result of the 21-day strike that led to the excessive use of electricity as children remained home and presumably opened and closed fridge doors a lot. And in another decision from the de facto government in Bolivia, a special police force to combat narco-terrorism and acts of subversion has been created. The anti-terrorist group, or GAT, in its Spanish initials, was formed a day after the government said there was an alleged plan financed by the Venezuelan president, Nicolás Maduro, to destabilize Bolivia and other countries in the region. Bolivia's cabinet chief, Arturo Murillo, said the force would start with 70 police officers and later expand. 34 people were killed by the police and army in the 9 days following the coup against President Evo Morales. In recent months, the United States has piled on the pressure to prevent oil imports from reaching Cuba, but the government in Havana has plans to boost its own production of crude.
This is Cuba's so-called Northern Heavy Crude Belt, which extends from Havana to Varadero. 98% of the country's oil production comes from here. The Boca de Jaruco field on this coastline is one of the most important investments in the sector. It is jointly managed by the Russian oil company Zarubezhnev and Cuba's state oil company Cupet.
This is one of the steps we need to take to achieve energy independence, but it's not the only one. Of course, energy independence can be achieved in several ways, including wind power, solar energy, hydroelectric power. We can even talk about nuclear energy. But it seems to me that right now, this is a project that can help the country move in this direction.
In recent months, the United States government has exerted huge pressure to block fuel supplies to Cuba. In such a complex situation, the Cuban government wants to reduce its oil imports.
We have exploration projects at this moment in the south of the Cuban oil strip, and the main target is to find a significant quantity of oil that is of much higher quality.
For foreign investors, the island offers opportunities that remain to be revealed. The Chinese oil company Great Wall came to Cuba in 2005. Since then, it has been in charge of drilling most of the oil wells in Cuba, with high-technology equipment that allows it, from dry land, to reach shallow water oil fields offshore.
The achievement obtained during the drill exceed our expectations and those of Cupet, keeping in mind that we have managed to sink wells with a good level of production. In this area, the oil is mostly heavy, but it is good quality and the production is significant.
Official figures put Cuba's current oil production at 43,000 barrels a day, a figure that is still well short of the country's domestic demand.
Most of this oil and gas is used to generate electricity. The big challenge we have at the moment is to stop the decline in production that there's been in the last 10 years.
Several new projects have been mapped out for the next 2 years in the Gulf of Mexico. The specialists estimate that there are more than 10 billion barrels of good quality, recoverable oil there, which could make a major contribution to Cuba's energy independence.
Millions have mobilized in France, shutting schools, stopping trains, and creating immense traffic as unions held nationwide strikes over the government's plans to overhaul the retirement system. 6,000 police officers were deployed to maintain order as anger builds against President Emmanuel Macron for a reform seen as threatening the French way of life. The Eiffel Tower and the Louvre Museum warned of strike disruptions, and Paris hotels struggled to fill rooms. 78% of the teachers stayed away from schools in the capital.
First of all, I tried to take the train, but they told me it was canceled. Yeah. And there were no information, no words in the outside. Yeah. I came in and I just see that it was closed.
I'm from New York and I came to Paris on vacation. And so I arrived at the airport this morning not knowing anything about the strikes happening. And we waited for almost 2 hours at the airport for a train to arrive, and it didn't arrive. But
4 members of the United Kingdom's Brexit Party who were elected to the European Parliament have left the site to support Conservatives in the British election next week. The Brexit Party was set up earlier this year by Nigel Farage, who played a major part in delivering the 2016 referendum in which Britons voted to leave the bloc. One of the 4 MPs deserting the party is the sister of high-profile cabinet minister and arch-Brexiter Jacob Rees-Mogg. The other MPs leaving are Lance Foreman, Lucy Harris and John Longworth, the former Director General of the British Chamber of Commerce, who was expelled by the Brexit Party on Wednesday.
Some great products that will be able to be sold.
In Nigeria, a pipeline explosion in West Lagos has caused multiple fires. Footage shows residents of the Idogu-Egba state stuck after a fire consumes a footbridge and surrounding area. The blast sent huge clouds of black smoke into the skies. Many have raised concern that the fire was caused by vandals. The Iranian government says that the attacks on its consulates in 3 Iraqi cities were part of a plan of aggression coordinated from outside Iraq. On November 27th, in the midst of the demonstrations and protests taking place in Iraq, a violent group attempted to break into the Iranian consulate in Najaf and set fire to it. Iraq's Foreign Minister Mohammed Hakim apologized to his Iranian counterpart, Javad Zarif, for the incident. Similar attacks were made against the Iranian consulate in September. The Iranian President Hassan Rouhani has called for the release of any unarmed and innocent protesters arrested over the past weeks.
But those who were not guilty or those whose crime is not major, they have to be treated with mercy and they should be released. We haven't closed the windows of negotiations. If the US are ready to lift the sanctions, we are ready to talk and negotiate it, even at the level of heads of the 5+1 heads countries. And we have clearly declared that before.
And today we end with this video in which thousands of women went out on the streets of the Chilean capital Santiago to perform a song that has gone viral in recent days and has become a symbol of the feminist movement in Latin America. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Until next time.